little bird off to the left-hand side. Go ahead and tweet this out. And so, G, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. My name is George B. Thomas. Usually I'm just George Thomas, but that's a very interesting point, is that online I am George B, to actually kind of separate myself from all of the other George Thomases that might be out there. It's kind of a persona or a shtick. I work for the salesline.com. That hasn't always been true. But because of what we're going to talk about today, that is a reality. And my life is crazy awesome. I travel around, I speak, I go to companies and I do workshops. I sit in my little office and dream about really cool things that we can do and accomplish all day. And it really is because of this personal brand journey that we're going to talk about today, Don.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this. And I'm actually going to see if Chris wants to join us too, because he's somebody who inspires me a lot on this, is that when we find meaning in the work we do our best work. And that doesn't mean just work in our business. It means in our life. It impacts our home life. It impacts our mental health, our physical health, all that kind of stuff, to really give us a sense of value, of happiness, etc. So for me, this scales way beyond just, hey, I want to be able to position myself as a great speaker, or I want to get a job that is something that I've been shooting for. I really think this is something that you need to think about because it transcends so many different areas.
Well, and I'll tell you, you use the word work, which I think is honestly a dirty word. I'm a big proponent of that. I really don't work at all. I play all day long. I might get to play on this website, or I might get to play analyzing these analytics, or I might get to play doing a blab. But none of it, to me, none of it feels like it's work. And that's I think, why I can be so involved for such long time periods, and it doesn't feel like I'm getting burnt out, or that I need a vacation, or I need a break from what I'm doing, because I'm just playing, man.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is important to think about, and this is true for everybody, years ago, I used to do career coaching. And one of the things that was true at the time was that the average work span we have, for most people, you start when you're 16 years old and go to 70 years old. But the average amount of time in a job for somebody in their 20s is 13 months. And in your 30s and 40s, it's like 36 months. And so the reality is we're always moving on and changing jobs, looking for new work. And one of the things I see a lot of people do is they feel like they're passive in the process of trying to become what they want to be and do the kind of work that they want to do. And I think your story is really compelling because it shows how when you start using digital media, your website, your social media channels, to start reaching out in a real strategic way, once you get to know who you are and what you want to do, you can really create opportunity. You don't have to be fresh out of college. You don't have to have a super special college degree or GPA or anything like that. It's really about leveraging what's there. So why don't you share some of your backstory about what you were doing and how you got to the point today of being this inbound hero, working with the man, the myth, the legend, Marcus Sheridan, and becoming one of the men, the myths, and the legends himself. So,
well, first of all, I humbly accept that, but I'm still on my own journey. I don't feel like I have become all that I am supposed to be, but I'm definitely working hard to get there. It's funny, before I dive too deep into this, Don, I want to say that you mentioned a second dirty word. Already we're like 4 minutes into the roll. And you mentioned retirement, right? And the fact that there's an end game to quit all of this. And I laugh because my wife and we have the end game that I'd love to build my brand to the point where retirement looks a little bit like something in a big RV, traveling around to go speak to different places until I just can't drive an RV anymore. Like, I don't even plan on ever retiring. Again, because I'm not working, I'm playing. But here's the deal. Everything that we're about to dive into, Don, I think we have to realize that it's predicated on one pivotal point, and that's, do you want to be something or somebody? You see, ever since I was a kid, I always felt like I was destined for more, destined to do something bigger than where I was at in life. And there's not all people feel like that. Some people, they get into their job. That's where they're comfortable. They like the 9 to 5. They like the wife. They like the the 2 kids and the white picket fence. And that's just
2.3 kids, 2.3 kids.
Yeah. Which I never understood that stat. Like, who wants the 0.3? But anyway, we digress. So some people are comfortable in that. And I always just felt like there was more, but I didn't really know what that more was. And so my first thing, though, is if you're comfortable, be comfortable. But if you are one of these, personality types where you're like, gosh, I always feel like I was destined for something else, then you need to go down that road and you need to address that. So a little bit about where I was. It was 2012, and I was working for an agency that did web development. We did traditional design, your typical things. And we actually had a social media manager that we did some social stuff on the side, very little. It was not like our cup of tea, it wasn't what we were great at. But he came to us one day, the owner and myself, and he said, hey, there's this world's biggest webinar going on. And this company named HubSpot is doing it. And we're like, HubSpot? That's a stupid name, but okay, let's go ahead and jump on this webinar. And so they were doing this thing that if you tweeted out so many times, the person who tweeted the most during the webinar, that 5 people out of the top 10 tweeters would win tickets. And our social media dude, his fingers were on fire, like he was blazing. And the bad thing is that he didn't win the tickets, but the owner and myself did. And so we went to Inbound 2012, and Don, I'll remember this day till the day I die. I was sitting in the keynote. The keynote was Gary Vaynerchuk. I was listening to him do his shtick for the first time ever. He was talking about Crush It. He was talking about Thank You Economy. I had heard all this stuff about inbound marketing and the methodology, and that you could be a real human and you didn't have to feel slimy to be a marketer. And I sat there and I had what I will call a God moment where I realized, oh my gosh, like everything I've done in my life, and I'm getting goosebumps, bro, just thinking about it right now. Everything in my life that I've done to this point has gotten me to that I'm supposed to be here listening to this, and I'm supposed to move on. And I made a really bold statement to myself and to the owner of the company that I was working for at that point. And I said, one of these days, I'm going to be there. I'm going to speak on that stage. I'm going to speak at Inbound. And when I said that, I didn't realize that in 3 years, they would go from 2,500 attendees to 14,000 attendees. So now my goal is really quite a large goal, but that's where it started out. That's what I wanted to drive to. And so to bring that to a point, what I needed to realize, and what people who go on this Inbound 0 to Inbound hero journey, and that's what we're talking about today. The first thing you need to understand is, where are you at, right? Where are you at right now? You have to be very self-aware. You have to understand the goods, the bads, the uglies of where you're at in the position. And from that, you need to realize, okay, where do I need to get? What tools do I need to gather around? Our buddy Chris Brogan is on the blab here. For him, it would be his Batman's tool belt, right? What do I need to have? And so for me, I realized
Spartan race tool belt.
Spartan race, exactly. So for me, I realized I've got to have strategy. I've got to have tactics. I've got to understand the methodology or the religion that is this inbound thing. And the biggest thing I knew right then and there, being a 0, man, I've got to build relationships with key people. So understand where you're at and understand the tools that you're going to need moving forward.
And thank you for the props. For those of you who are watching, make sure to tweet out this blab to people, because part of the goal of using this platform is George and I are really into, we want to change people's lives with this. I teach a personal branding class at the University of Wisconsin, as well as do this type of work with my clients. And you see a lot of times people's lives, when they get a sense that they have control of this, you get a switch that's flipped, and you get much more positive. You get much more, a lot of the anxiety, depression. I mean, not to go too deep on that route, but I see that a lot in people, that once they start to feel like what that moment you just had, where you talked about that Gary Vaynerchuk moment, that, hey, this is possible. I can be and share the gifts that I have by building my brand online. I mean, that really changes people's lives. And again, I've seen it with lots of different students, lots of different clients. So can you talk a little bit about what it was that you started doing from a digital media standpoint to start making connections, to go from being this guy who just gets lucky enough to win a ticket because you let a minion do your work, to getting recruited essentially by Marcus Sheridan of the sales line? To give us a little bit of background on that, if you could.
Yeah. So the first thing, Don, I did is I said, who is already where I want to be? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I looked for people like Mark Schaefer, Chris Brogan, Marcus Sheridan, Jay Baer, all the guys that were like where I wanted to be. And I started paying very close attention to what they were doing. You know, how were they speaking? Were they putting on podcasts? Were they blogging all the time? How were they changing people's lives? And I quickly was able to find some that I wanted to filter out, because I didn't believe that they were going to help build the message that I felt I needed to eventually bring to the world. And so I had this core group of guys that I would really pay attention to. And what I want people to realize is they were my mentors, even though they didn't have any clue who I was. They didn't know I existed, right? But they were my mentors, and I paid attention to what they were teaching. The other thing that I did is that I became a sponge, Don. And what I mean by becoming a sponge is, when I gathered those folks around, I absorbed everything I could absorb. I would pay attention to these thought leaders. I would listen to their podcasts. And I'm going to get real here for a second. When this is really important to you, it's podcasts versus Netflix. Okay? It's podcast versus Dancing with the Stars, because with podcasting, you're actually bringing education that you're going to be able to leverage and use for other people in the future. Here's the other thing. When you're really into this, Don, your top apps become things like Audible, Pocket, and Pocket Cast, or iTunes, instead of Candy Crush, Angry Birds, and freaking Words with Friends, right? Because you're focused on absorbing so much, because you know that right here, you want to give value back out. And if you're an inbound zero, if you're a content marketing zero, you ain't got nothing to give. You can't give no love.
Yep.
And so you got to get it inside you. You got to work it around in your own brain. You got to come up with your own thoughts and processes so that you can redeposit it into the world around a community that is going to engage and understand you. Okay.
Amen and amen. And just to riff on that, just for a quick second, I think that's so incredibly important, because I know people who are the big names. Everybody wants a piece of their mind, and all the people that I know, I mean, Chris is a great example because he's here, are so generous, but there's a limit to, they have families, they have lives. And if you want to pick their brain, go listen to their podcast, go read their books, go read their materials, because they're sharing so much quality there that, it's invaluable. And, it reminds me of something that Dave Ramsey told me once, which is, if you want to see somebody's level of success, go look at the size of their television set versus the size of their library. And we can translate it to digital. And it's okay to watch TV. It's okay to relax. But if all you're doing, like you said, is playing those games and doing things to, essentially check out, which we all need to a degree. But if you're not filling yourself with great stuff from people who are leading the way, letting them mentor you digitally, I mean, that's extremely powerful. So I love that.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound all Mother Teresa about this. Trust me, I have.
You remind me of Mother Teresa.
Listen, I have binge watched Heroes and Lost many a time, but then I realized, hey, I got to stop and I got to get back on this road that I'm journeying down. Now I want to talk about, because we were talking about what got me to where I am now, and I want to say what I think is the most. Well, there's a lot of valuable points, so this is maybe a medium to most valuable point. Is that, dude, I was really good at being human. Really good at being human. So I'll tell this story. I was listening to a podcast Marcus Sheridan was doing. I think it was episode 16 of Mad Marketing.
Yeah.
He said something about taking his kids to church the next morning. And I was like, oh, dude, I love this guy. Like, I'm in. I'll listen to every podcast from here on out that he ever does. And so I sent him an email and I said, dude, I don't want anything. I just want to let you know, I think it's super cool that you dropped the fact you're taking your kids to church the next morning. That means a lot to me. That's it. Right. And I didn't realize how valuable that email was at that point. But now looking back and all the people that email us and it's always an ask.
Yes.
It's always an ask.
Yes.
And so that email actually from hindsight was priceless. But so that started this really weird thing of like 6 months after that, he used Wild Boy, which was the company I was working for at that
totally
point.
Remember that.
Yeah. So he used an About Us page as an example on his website. I about passed out. I'm like, oh my God, we're on the sales line, and so that was a super cool moment. And then Inbound 2013, I went back. I made sure I saw him speak in person. I went up to the front of the stage where when he was done speaking. I went to shake his hand. He pulled it in for the hug. I was like, oh man, this dude is super awesome. So we talked for a little bit. And from that point, he, in his mind, like, there's something to this guy, meaning me, right? And I'm not saying he thought that I was, better than Lucky Charms or anything, but he just had this feel that there was something there. And so 8 months after that, I got this mysterious phone call. Hey, this is Marcus Sheridan. I'm like, who's punking me? Like, who is this really? And he's like, no, this is Marcus Sheridan. So we had a conversation, and so then, bam, I got hired for the sales line. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now. Wow. And again, it's one of those things where I don't ever think about what's next as far as a place of employment because, man, this is home, baby. So that's kind of what got me here. But I'll tell you, from once I got to the point I'm at now, there are some definite things that I focus on, but maybe we'll get into that as we go.
Yeah, so it sounds like, one of the things that is important to emphasize is it's this combination of online and offline. So it isn't just, reaching out to people online. And I think you hit on a huge key point is that people like, again, I'll point out Chris, and not to hopefully not to embarrass you, but Chris has made a huge difference in my life for so many reasons, talking about mental health issues, talking about Spartan Race, talking about so many things. And I will share his stuff anytime because he's about changing people's lives. And I hope that he sees that a lot, because I hope he understands how that he should feel good about that. Same thing with Marcus. I've connected with Marcus on a personal level that way too. And to just say and reach out to people and say, thank you, you're helping out. I really appreciate what you're doing. Don't take for granted how much that means to somebody. And you can do that through a tweet. You can do that through sharing content on a Facebook page or a LinkedIn account. If you really believe in what somebody is doing, that's one way to genuinely get on their radar and also genuinely give them props for saying, hey, you're making a difference. We really, really appreciate it. And that's meaningful to me.
Hey, listen, I'll agree, Don. It is about offline. I'll give you a little Inbound 2015 behind the scenes that nobody knew that was going on. It was like the last day of Inbound. Chris Brogan had spoke. I didn't get a chance to go see him because he, in the infinite wisdom of Inbound, they put Marcus Sheridan and Chris Brogan at the same time slot. No. I was like super pissed. But so I'm down in Club Inbound and I'm actually talking to another person. And all of a sudden I get this text, bing, and I look down and it's Tiffany Cavane, who is part of our team. And she's like, I am sitting with Chris Brogan right now. And so I'm literally like looking at the guy and he's in mid-sentence and I'm listening to him and I'm like, hey, bro, I'm going to circle back around. I'll be right back. And like, that's me, right? I'm trying to get upstairs so that I can sit on this white couch and just get the opportunity to ask Chris Brogan, hey, bro, when you were grinding it out, like what were the top things that you did to get to the next level of being a speaker? Because I knew that he had valuable things to tell me. And in true fashion, he riffed off like 5-6 things. And I was like, this is super priceless. Anyway, Don, here's what I want to talk about, because you talked about offline and online as well. One of the things, and you guys should probably tweak this out. I don't know if we can change the title or just people need to pay attention to this. When you get to a certain level, when you start to feel that kind of flow of your personal brand coming up, don't swim to the top by yourself. And so my point is you need to be a lifter. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm going with this, is that last RGE, which is Remarkable Growth Experience, I got the opportunity to meet you, Don Stanley, in real person. We got to eat breakfast. We got to eat lunch. We got to sit in a room for 2 days and learn from Ian Altman, Joey Coleman, and Marcus Sheridan how to just rock your business on sales, marketing, customer service. And I was like, I like this dude. Don is a cool dude, right? I had that same vibe that Marcus might have had for me, I had for you. And as well as there's people that have helped you get to the point where you're at in your life. So I want to give a shout out to my homeboy, Eric Jacobs, who was who mentored me and taught me a lot about design principles and typography and white space and all that stuff that I use every single day. And so when the brand started to build up, I was like, you know what? I want to take these cats with me. I want to be a lifter. And so that's why we started the Inbound Life podcast, where the three of us hop on and we talk about social media, we talk about inbound marketing, we talk about design, and we bring the three disciplines together. But we all three rise together, right? So don't take that ride to, and I use big, huge air quotes here, stardom, because it isn't stardom. It's just another level. Don't ride it by yourself. Bring people with you.
And I think that's really true, is that, you know, when you share the experience with different people and you find that alignment, that's one of the other things that I really push people to do in my classes and in my workshops, is find people who are peers. I mean, like you had mentioned, we really connected. You had actually reached out to me. We met through Marcus's community, and you reached out to me, and I don't remember the exact tweet, but it was something really short. And I'm like, hey, that's the dude who was from Wild Boys. How cool is that? And then I saw your photo, and this goes into that, how you build your personal brand online, and the avatar of you with this big smile, the spiked hair, you know, it's like, hey, this dude seems like fun, you know, my kind of person. And again, that's something that you think about with that personal brand. And then we connected, we got to know each other, and then we got to take that experience in person, and that really has deepened. Now, not many people know who we are. You know, we're not at the Marcus Sheridan, Mark Schaefer, Chris Brogan level, but we're able to really help each other out, to rise up, to make connections with folks like that who are willing to connect with us. And really, to me, it's not about anything other than having a big impact. It's about changing people's lives, whether or not it's on us, and I don't care who gets the credit. It's just about making that difference. And that's where, when I become so passionate about that personal branding, you know, when you genuinely reach out, you share that avatar images on all your accounts. That's really who you are. Have a little personality, not just your professional goals, but your personality, where you talked about connecting with Marcus with church. One of the reasons that I love, like I said, with Chris is Spartan race. We connected talking about Spartan races. To me and other people, it's important. To others, it's not. And that's something that we often are like, well, no, keep it just professional, or keep it just personal. And no, it needs to be a combination of the two, because in the end, you know, the reason I connected with you is because you're a person, and you're a person who has a lot of overlaps with me in terms of our interests. It's not because, you know, you're a brand, or it's a human connection. And I think that's really needs to be emphasized when you're thinking of, how do I build my personal brand? What type of content do I put out on Facebook or Twitter or whatever the social network is? Don't be afraid to inject a little bit of yourself into it, because that's incredibly important to finding those peers and helping rise together. You know, something that we talked about a lot at RGE last year.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, Don, I'm going to go a little sideways here for a second. I am a human, right? I put my pants on one leg at a time. But what's really crazy is I'm a human who really can't change my hairdo, because it's become its own thing. Like, everybody's like, oh, yeah, the spiky hair guy, you know, or as Marcus would say, the prayer hair. So it's just is what it is. And here's the thing. I love, though, pardon me, I love that you brought up the fact of connections, right? There's this thing in our space that everybody talks about, how you need to be a connector. You know, oh, I want to, you know, get this guy into this person. And I would beg to differ. And I would say that you need to be the connection, meaning you need to be the person that everybody goes, oh, I should get them with this person, or I should, you know, be with that person or talk to that person. And so for me, this is one of the things that I knew, because remember, I talked about, Don, that I needed to build some relationships, right? I needed to build some clout in the inbound world, because again, I started at inbound 0. Nobody knew jack about me. And so I started doing interviews, right? But I was very specific about the interviews I did. I did things that were HubSpot employees or from the HubSpot Academy, or if they integrated a platform with HubSpot like SurveyMonkey or Uberflip, I would do an interview with that person. We also started a podcast called the Hubcast, which is specifically for HubSpot users, because one of the things we were trying to do was kind of just get in front of this community and add value to this community, which of course then builds your brand, right? The more value you add, the faster your brand will build, by the way. Somebody should tweet that out. The more value you add, the faster your brand will build. And so here's the other thing, though. That's all like, yeah, George, that makes sense. The number one thing I will tell you that I think made a huge difference as far as the right relationships with the right HubSpot folks to get on the radar of not being an inbound zero was when I would be on one of their webinars, I wouldn't be a passive audience. I wouldn't just sit there and watch the slides and drink my drink and eat my hot dog and go, yeah, that was a great webinar. I would tweet the crap out of it. I would screenshot things and send them out. And people were like, how are you tweeting this stuff out so quick? And I would use the chat pane, not just to ask questions, but like I would ask the guys doing the webinars random questions like M&M's versus Skittles, right? That comes in your chat pane just as you're doing a webinar and you're like I would just make myself different than the other 50, 100, or 300 attendees, because even if they were asking a question to the audience, I would answer the question in the chat pane like they were just asking me, right? Yeah. And so all of a sudden they would start to, oh, hey, Mauricio, George B. Thomas just typed in that here's a great title for your blog that you're thinking about writing that we were just talking about. So now I was part of this process. So, be the connection, Don.
And I love it. Karen said in the chat, she said, you made yourself memorable. And I think that's so important. Chris made himself memorable too by saying that he puts his pants on one leg at a time, and he also pays somebody to help him put his pants on one leg at a time. So we'll have to dig into that more later.
And that's why we love Chris Brogan, because he's witty as all get out. I love it.
Exactly. So a couple of things for all of us to take away from what you said is really thinking about you have to be somebody who reaches out and is willing to put yourself out there. And I know I did not get to go to Inbound this year, but a friend of ours, Krista Catrola, got to go, and not only got to go, but got to meet Bren Brown. And she talked about this idea of vulnerability. Is there anything you can touch on with that idea of vulnerability and personal branding when it comes to thinking about making yourself, putting yourself out of there, getting out of your comfort zone of, well, what if nobody responds to me in the chat pane? Or what if I walk up to Marcus and he just gives, or somebody at an event, they just give me 2 seconds. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny, dude. It's like you're looking at my notes, and I didn't send you my notes. I just want to throw that out there. But the next two things I want to talk about, and they go hand in hand, is that, well, let's back up for a second. Remember, Don, I started this blab with, it's this whole conversation is predicated on the fact if you want to be someone or do something, okay? If you say yes to that, then you immediately need to believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. You need to understand that you have the chops to get the job done. And you need to realize immediately that you're going to fall down, it's going to hurt, and you're going to have to get back up. Now, for me, this was an easy lesson because a little known fact I'm going to drop on this blab is that I grew up in Montana, and my wife actually calls me her incognito cowboy because I have actually am certified in horseback riding, and I've trained people how to ride, and I've trained horses. And one of
I did not know.
Yeah, well, I see you didn't know that. And so one of the things that whenever you get bucked off, you get back on and you ride again, right? And so that's always been a fundamental mental process for me. If you get bucked off the horse, you get back on and you ride down the road until you train that horse to do it right, or until you figure out how to do it right. So when I first started this, trust me, like I had many things that would buck me off my horse. I don't know, my spelling, my grammar, the fact that I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a blog. I don't know. There was a ton of things. And so I just realized, hey, I'm going to plow through this. I'm going to believe in myself. And here's what it comes down to. I haven't really, up until recently, because you talked about vulnerability, right? When you believe in yourself to some point, there's this opportunity for you to put on armor. Like, I'm going to believe in myself, but I'm going to protect myself. Okay. And so now, and that's how I started the journey, right? I kind of put some padding on here or there, and I just went for it. Now I can tell you that I'm actually at the point in my journey where vulnerability is a key to me, right? And so I'm going to tell you a little story that will share a little bit about this, and that's that I was sitting at a cheesecake factory. That's where we were. And it was Tiffany, and it was Marcus, and it was myself. And I was getting ready to go do a keynote for the Menbound conference. And Marcus looked over at me and said, "Hey, how are you going to start your keynote?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about starting like this." And he's like, "No, I think you should drop the bomb." And I'm like, "Bro, I'm not dropping the bomb." And he's like, "You should drop the bomb." And he's like, "Why is it so hard for you to drop the bomb?" And I'm like, "I've been running from the bomb for 25 years. And he's like, "Dude, you need to drop the bomb." And so I'll just share it with people on the blab. The bomb for me is that I'm a high school dropout, right? And so I was like, I've been running from that for 25 years because I had some dumb teacher tell me that I would never amount to anything. And for a short time of my life, I believed him, and I let him affect the way that I was going to live life until I chose, nah, homie ain't playing that. I'm going to go a different way, right? And so I did it. You know, I opened up my keynote and I said, "Hey, I'm a high school dropout." And I had to be vulnerable to do that. And I had to let people in. And I had to let people chuckle in the audience thinking it was a joke. And that was fun. And then go, "No, really, I'm a high school dropout." And then, you know, there's just something about if you can embrace your vulnerability, the level that people will immediately be like, "Oh my gosh, they're real people." And here's what's really cool is that for me, this inbound zero to inbound hero journey isn't about becoming the man, the myth, the legend, George B. Thomas. But it really comes down to the core that, Don, I want to be able to help change people's lives. And because I was able to embrace my vulnerability at this keynote, I had a lady come up to me at the end of the keynote and say, "You know, it really sucks when people tell you that you can't be somebody." And she said, "For me, George, that was my mother." And we had a 20-minute conversation, and I realized, man, Marcus Sheridan is the smartest dude on the freaking face of the planet, because if I would have not started my keynote that way, I wouldn't have had those priceless 20 minutes to help change that lady's life.
And I think that is something when you think of your branding. I hate using the word strategy because it makes it seem like it's not real. But you know, that's the type of stuff. Share on your blog, share in a series of tweets, share on Facebook, because the reality is we all struggle. We all have our flaws. Chris was talking about this earlier. You know, he talks about how we all have that. And when you're willing to share that, people feel like, wow, this is another human being on the other end of the cast. So I'll share something. Just it's not so much a bomb in a similar way, but it's something that. So I was talking to my students yesterday in a class where we talk a lot about personal branding, and I had a student, you know, and they were asking me, you know, why is this so important? Why is this so valuable? Well, I had a student last week who committed suicide, and you know, for me, I love my students, I love my clients, I see them as people, and part of it was there were a number of mitigating factors, but it was she didn't believe that once school was finished, because she had literally just graduated, that there was anything beyond that, because you know people had told her, well, this is the best it can get, and there's other things involved.
Sure,
but the reason I get so into this is because I see people struggling when they think that what a high school teacher said, what a parent said, what somebody else said, that defines who they are, and that's a complete BS. It's what we have to learn to be protective of what we say to ourselves in our heads. And sometimes just getting it out there and saying, hey, this is something that's a flaw in me. It not only exposes that vulnerability, but like I said, on digital, on social, in real life, it connects people with you because we're all flawed. And they're like, hey, I'm like that too. Wow. Thank you for saying that, because now I realize, you know, we're more similar than we are different. And
yeah, you know, I love that you went down that road, Don, because for me, it's not a strategy, right? So in the marketing space, we always talk about strategy, and you got to have a strategy. And I would say when we're talking about personal brand, we need to use a different word. We need to use the word purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because purpose is deeper than strategy. And so for me, the point that I'm making here is have a purpose. For me, my purpose is about my family, right? I know how I grew up. I know how my wife grew up. I knew the punches and, the things that happened during those time frames. And I wanted something better for her for the rest of her life. I wanted something better for my kids for the rest of their life. And I go back to what I kind of jumped the gun on my other story, is that I wanted to be able to change people's lives, right? As a recovering youth pastor, as a recovering associate pastor, there's always this little kind of core piece of me that says, man, if there isn't a bigger purpose, if I'm not doing this to make somebody's life better, then I should just go home and watch the Flintstones.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the cool thing, because one of the things, I work with a couple of veterans groups, and one of the things when it comes to veterans groups is a lot of vets feel a lack of purpose when they leave the military. They lose the cohesion of team and of purpose. And my dad's a Korean War vet, and today, 22 veterans a day kill themselves.
Yeah.
It's an epidemic. And part of it is when we don't feel like our life is purposeful, we don't feel like we're important and we don't matter. Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be going out, and it can be changing the world. I always say, you could be a Walmart greeter and make sure that you greet everybody who comes in like they're a long lost friend, and give them a smile, give them a reason to smile. That changes people's lives. It could be speaking from a stage, whatever it is. And when you're doing your personal branding work, circling it back to that too, people pick up on that. Who wants to be around somebody who's a downer? Yeah. Somebody, because, and I've been on interviewing panels where there's people who come in who just knock your socks off with their resumes, and you look at their backgrounds, you're like, wow. But then you talk to them and you're like, we can't work with this person. They're going to be a drain on everybody's energy. They're going to bring negativity to the office. And then you meet somebody who comes in with all of this energy, enthusiasm, they're who they are. And it's completely different, where it's like, hey, we can teach this person how to do X, Y, and Z, but they bring value to where we're at. I think that's a really important thing to think about and to be conscientious of when it comes to, being ourselves with this as well. As I tell my students, you want to be really honest and open when you're reaching out for doing your personal branding, because we're doing personal branding for a lot of times business purposes. We want to get a new job, or we want to get new clients, or we want to speak. And, the more genuine you are, what it's going to do is it's going to turn some people off. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to work with everybody. You want to work with the right people. And the more you can connect with those right people, the more true fans you're going to have, and the more impact you're going to have. Too many people want to please everybody. And when you do that, you lose who you are and what your purpose is. Really speak to who it is that you're intending to connect with, again, your social media updates, your blog updates, etc., and carry that over into your real life. Be genuine both ways. And it's going to make a big impact in helping people, like Marcus did with you. Just say, man, there's something cool about this George dude. Hey, now it's been reinforced in real life, and you got that feeling back. And, then you get synergy, and it works out phenomenally well, both personally and professionally, because this isn't just a kumbaya feel good thing. It impacts the bottom line as well.
Yeah. It's funny, Don, you hit on something that I don't know if you or I or anybody in the audience realizes how important it is, but one of the most important natural resources that we have that is in so little demand, it's in large demand, but in so little supply, that's the way it should be said, is the human smile. The human smile. Laura Williams in the chat pane said, you never know if you're the only person that will smile at them that day. And that is so, so true. I mean, everybody is so worried about themselves and everything that they're going through. And if you are that person that takes a moment to stop and look up and smile and make somebody's day, man, the world would
Yeah.
be a better place, bro. It just
It's
would.
it's interesting because one of my mentors, who I've never met in person, I've only read everything that he's written on the idea of personal development, is Andy Andrews, and he wrote. Andy Andrews is a great the Traveler's Gift is the first book that he wrote. It's a great parable type book. He has a couple of others that are really, really good. But he said, somebody asked him recently, it was Michael Hyatt or Dave Ramsey or somebody like that. They said, if you could have people do one thing to really change who they are, have a bigger impact in the world, personally, professionally, et cetera, what would you do? And he said, I would have them smile, and I would have them smile when they talk.
Yeah.
Because there's something, I'm a neuroscience geek, and there's something in our brains called mirror neurons. And when we see somebody else doing something, it gets reflected back to us. Yeah. And it's amazing. And the cool thing is, if you study the science, it actually extends just beyond the two people who are on screen, and it extends to the people who are not on screen right now. And that has an impact. And Mary Kay, the woman who founded Mary Kay, the cosmetic company, if you think of what she did, she started this woman-based, home-based business at a time where women were not empowered to work. They were expected, yeah, honey, that's a cute little thing you're doing on the side. Go ahead and do it. And empowered these women to become powerful business people. Somebody asked and said, well, what was the key to when you started becoming really successful? And she said, it was super simple. The one thing I did was I imagined everybody I met had a sign around their neck, and that sign said, please make me feel important. And you can do that by smiling. You can do that by genuinely looking somebody in the eye and saying, hey, how you doing? And that's the same thing. And you can reflect that in a digital presence some way too, by just reaching out and say, hey, I saw you did a Spartan race, Chris. Congratulations. Really cool to see that. Or, hey, George, I just saw you wrote this post. Or Laura, you just wrote this post. Or Karen, you just wrote this post. And it really meant a lot to me. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that those types of things can really help build that brand. I mean, I don't know. I just want to give a shout out to Karen on one thing she posted where she did a blab yesterday. And for the first half of the blab, nobody was on it, but she kept going. And that's cool. She shares that vulnerability and says she knows that it can be put on YouTube and it can eventually change somebody's lives. So don't get caught up in just looking at that. Think about the bigger picture. And that's cool. So those little things, again, are like a digital smile in many ways that help people see that, hey, who is this person? I want to start following their accounts. I want to connect with them, and I want to see who they are, because maybe they'll fit into the fold sometime down the road.
Absolutely.
So we're getting close to the thank you, Laura. I'm glad that just wowed you. So we're getting close to the 45-minute level, and I've learned that a maximum of 1 hour for blabs is really kind of the ideal. So I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. I really appreciate you guys joining us. So do you have any parting words of wisdoms? If you can take one or two things from today that you want to share with everybody who's given us their time, people who are going to watch this on YouTube, what would those be to get started with building that brand online and offline?
Yeah, building your brand, you can, here it is. You need to collect your mentors, right? Pay attention to who you want to listen to. You need to believe in yourself that you have the chops to get it accomplished. And then you need to be vulnerable to tell your own story, because you've been given an amazing story that the world needs to hear. And you've been given an amazing brain that will process things different than anybody else has ever processed them. You'll be able to explain things in a way that people will just understand. And so, yeah, learn as much as you can from your mentors, believe in yourself, and then just go rock that crap.
Yep. And the other thing to know too, and we'll be doing more of these in the future where we'll actually take questions and stuff. But remember, everybody has flaws. Everybody has challenges. The more real you are, the more helpful you can be to others. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. I'm happy to share some of my struggles, because again, that makes us more human. And believing in yourself is really one of those. I mean, it sounds cliche and it sounds, whatever, Tony Robbins or whatever, which I like Tony Robbins stuff, by the way. But, if you don't believe in yourself, if you can't get the enemies in your head quiet, you're nothing else matters. everybody can tell you how great you are, but if you don't really believe that, and I always tell my students and my clients and my kids and myself, hey, let somebody give you a genuine compliment and say thank you and really process that.
Yeah.
Because when you learn that you are of value, you start to feel more confident in the right way, sharing out who you are and what you can do. And I might be a little kumbaya here, but the reality is that's what makes the world a better place. And that's what makes business more fun. That's what makes life more fun. That's what makes you better in the friendships you have, the relationships you have, because you feel like I'm making a difference. And that is super, super valuable.
You just made me think of something, Don. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So much. You're right. It does come down to understanding your own value. And so one thing that I didn't get a chance to talk about, and we need to at least say, is that periodically you need to stop. You need to do a 180-degree turn, and you need to look down that mountain that you've climbed to see where you're at compared to where you started. So
Absolutely.
definitely stop and look at the journey that you've taken. You're not the same person anymore. You're like, I look back now and I'm like, I'm not that 17-year-old kid that Mr. Herbelich said will never amount to anything, right?
Yeah.
I'm George B. Thomas, dang it.
That's exactly right. And that's, again, we'll address this on future episodes, but I think it's so important to get to that point. And for myself, I had some challenges with my dad, stuff that he brought home from Korea that really were kind of like that. And just getting to the point where you say, that was a gift. I don't think my dad intended to be hard in the way that he was. I think, but now I see it as a gift that, thank you. You forced me to believe in myself. And now I don't do it out of anger, and I don't do it out of spite to prove you wrong. I do it because, I was hardened, quote unquote, in some ways, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing to say, hey, I now believe in myself, and, that sense of being able to look back, that it was a gift to have some of those challenges. And again, we all have challenges, and what comes out of them is going to be what we decide comes out of them. So
absolutely.
Well, George, thank you so much for joining. And everybody, thank you so much for joining in. I'm really appreciative. George and I are going to be doing some of these. I know I'll be doing more of these as well. And I'm going to try to pull George in, because George is the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to this stuff. Really love and appreciate the time. We'll make sure to share out this recording, and hopefully we're able to connect with all of you guys in the near future, both online and hopefully in person.